Engineers over the last 10, 15 years have been exploring and innovating using cloud native technologies. And while those have been great, they've also led to several challenges for security teams. Security teams fundamentally have one important task, which is to secure access in sensitive systems that host sensitive data, right? Which means that they are incentivized to make sure that any production environment, only the people and the entities that need access have access and nobody else has any access at any time. What's changed in the last 10, 15 years as most companies have moved on to cloud native environments or at the very minimum hybrid environments is that the stack has changed fundamentally in at least a couple of different ways. First, it's not just users who are trying to access the cloud anymore. It's increasingly service accounts, machine identities. These go by non-human identities, by the moniker non-human identities, and increasingly in the future it will be AI agents as well, right? And what that means is the number of entities or identities that can access a production stack these days has just exploded from what it used to be 10, 15, or 20 years ago. Secondly, the other big important change is that the way these identities access the cloud has changed, or the production stack has changed. Why do I say that? 20 years ago, production stack meant a server in a data center or some databases again hosted on physical bare metal servers inside a data center. And access to those servers or databases was usually through a root account or an administrator account or a DB admin account. Again, these went by various different names. And access was regulated by creating a root credential and then vaulting that root credential. And now all of these services are in the cloud. These services can spin up and spin down on demand. There are many such services. It's not as few as they were on an on-prem stack. The number of such resources in a production stack in a cloud environment has increased tremendously. What this also means is that the number of different ways these identities can access these cloud resources has changed. They could be trying to SSH into a virtual machine. They could be trying to access a cloud database, or they could be trying to assume any one of tens of thousands of different entitlements, right? And to summarize, the explosion in the number of identities, as well as the explosion in the number of ways these identities can access the cloud, has just increased tremendously. And this has introduced a complexity in managing privileged access, which just wasn't there before. And this has necessitated a new paradigm, a new way of solving privileged access, which is what P0 is building. Fundamentally, any organization faces a trade-off between security and developer productivity. It does not always have to be like that, but historically, for the lack of better systems, that's how it's been. What do I mean by this trade-off? Security teams ultimately want to secure privileged access, which has three components to it. First, they want to make any privileged access short-lived. Second, they want to make any access least privileged by design. And last, they want to make sure that any access is auditable and there are recordings of all the activity that have gone on behind the scenes. The challenge becomes that the moment they try to impose these requirements on a developer team, it introduces unnecessary friction. As an example, a developer might say that, hey, they need these privileges for doing their day-to-day task, right? Even though that task may not be day-to-day, right? But granting and revoking that access may not be the most straightforward. And so there is a natural entropy in most organizations to allow developers to over time gain more and more privileges into sensitive systems, right? Because what's the alternative? If you cut back their system, there's access to sensitive systems. What will usually happen is that they'll start complaining. It will lead to some downtime on their behalf, and that's a situation nobody wants to be in. So that's what I mean by most companies face a trade-off between ensuring developers are working securely and they have access to the tools they need. And this is a challenge that P0 solves very well. The idea being that there should be no friction between requesting access, that access being provisioned, that access being deprovisioned once that their work is done, and implementing this across the entirety of tools, entirety of services, all the infrastructure, all servers, all databases, all Kubernetes cluster, and literally just about any other service within the production environment, right? We want to ensure that if and when a developer or a non-human identity or an AI agent, when they request access, when they need access to something, that should be just provisioned automatically, and it should be taken away when that particular task has been completed, so that there is no trade-off between least privilege as well as maintaining operational efficiency. Any privileged access solution needs to solve three fundamental jobs for a customer. The first, make sure every access is least privilege. Second, make sure every access is short-lived. And third, create an audit history of every activity that is taking place behind the scenes. Historically, PAM solutions have been of one of two different categories. The first category is what I would call as a secret-led or a vault-led PAM solution. The way such solutions solve the problem of just-in-time access was requiring users store any root passwords or database passwords or credentials in a vault, and then checking out those passwords whenever they require to, and then rotating them after use. The reason these solutions, this kind of JIT access, does not work in a cloud-native environment is because increasingly cloud access does not rely on root passwords at all. And the attack surface instead has moved to entitlements from passwords. The second category of PAM solutions are what I would call as a bastion-led PAM solution. They overcome these challenges of the vault-led solutions by putting in a server called a bastion or a proxy in front of a cloud environment and mandating that all access go in via these bastions. The problem these solutions face is that they don't implement JIT access at all. Their model relies on giving users standing access to whatever it is that they need in the cloud. A second problem these guys face is that they also rely to some extent on SSH keys and other static keys and credentials. And this is where our solution comes in. We believe that for a cloud native stack, P0 is the best in class solution for implementing just-in-time access, because we can take and provision access based on the APIs of any infrastructure that a user might need access to. We call this the API-led PAM, or the API-led approach to implementing just-in-time access. Using this approach, we can ensure three things. First, we can cover just about every category of access that a user might require. Second, we eliminate the need for any kind of short-lived, any kind of static keys or credentials. And last but not the least, we come up with the best-in-class user experience for a PAM solution, which is unmatched by any legacy solution, whether it is vault-based or whether it is based on bastions. The benefits that our customers get from P0 fall into three broad categories. First and foremost, it helps them improve the security posture of the organization. How do we improve security? We do this in two different ways. First, we eliminate the reliance on static credentials, which might be in use by users or by service accounts or by non-human identities. We ensure that the organization starts moving away from any kind of static credentials which are massively overprivileged and which could give a malicious actor the keys to the kingdom. Secondly, we help operationalize least privilege in an organization. We ensure that any identity, be it a human, be it an AI agent, be it a non-human identity, has just the right level of access right when they need it the most. In other words, we help streamline security by operationalizing least privilege and by eliminating the reliance on static keys and credentials. The second big benefit that we give our customers is making their operations more streamlined. How do we do that? In order to maintain least privilege, or in order to cut back privileged access, most organizations have workflows for rotating secrets, for rotating passwords, for provisioning access, for deprovisioning access, we can come in and we can automate all of that using our solutions for just-in-time access and our solutions for automating secrets rotation. These workflows alone in our product save any respectable sized organization hours of development time. And we don't stop there. By ensuring that engineers don't have to wait for access when they need it, we can also deliver productivity gains which they would have not experienced otherwise. In other words, by automating workflows for just-in-time access, workflows for provisioning access, deprovisioning access, and for rotating secrets, we can ensure hours of productivity gain for development teams. Last but not the least, our solution helps accelerate compliance. Almost every compliance framework, such as SOC 2, such as FedRAMP, such as ISO 2701, almost all of them have requirements around running an inventory and posture of every identity that can access any sensitive system, as well as ensuring that their access is least privileged by design. Customers spent hours documenting and gathering proof and implementing requirements for such compliance frameworks. Using P0, we can just automate all of that from the ground up and ensure any compliance standards are met automatically and by design, saving teams a lot of time in gathering evidence and proving to auditors that everything is under control in their production environments.